when you buy an asset, there are 4 profit levers. I know you know them, most of you, but let's work through this together just so we get clear on them. What is profit lever number 1? Profit lever number 1, say it out loud. Profit lever number 1 is discount. That's right, it's discount. Okay, discount. This is for any strategy, by the way. Profit lever number 2 is what? Say it out loud. Profit lever number 2, it's cash flow. Join in, team, because saying it out loud using that voice box vibrations locks it in. What's profit lever number 3? Profit lever number 3 is equity growth. Equity growth. Capital appreciation, right? And profit lever number 4 only works if number 2 and 3 are both at the table. Both of them have to be at the table. But if you've got good cash flow so you can put your rents up and you've got good equity growth, profit lever number 4 is refinance. The ability to refinance your property, release money, and buy more property. Okay? Now, we want, in any deal we do, ideally all 4 to be at the table. Now, if you're doing rent to SA, you're creating awesome cash flow. 310 grand of cash flow per annum, pretty awesome. I like it, right? Nothing wrong with that. But you've not got the discount, that belongs to the landlord. You've not got the equity growth, that belongs to the landlords. And you've not got the ability to refinance. So I'm not saying don't do it. It is an awesome strategy to get you out of the rat race. If you're sat with me going, I hate my job, I want out. Or I've got a gap in my income, I need to fill quick. I need to fill it quick. Right? Rent to SA, brilliant. But if you own these babies, if you own them, you can get all 4 profit levers at the table, not just the 1. Does that make sense by show of hands, team? Okay, so let's assume we go buy 3 properties to run as serviced accommodation. Now, just as a reminder, so we're all on the same page, right? If I'm going to buy them to run them as serviced accommodation, there's a couple of things I've got in mind. I want it to meet the 7 C's, which we're going to cover today for serviced accommodation. However, it must also, in my book, meet the 6 C's for family let. Now, that makes them harder to find because I'm trying to meet 2 sets of rules at the same time. Why am I saying that? The reason I'm saying that is I believe if you buy SAs right now, if you think about the serviced accommodation strategy, right now, let's say they make you £1,000 a month. As more and more people get in the market, and there's plenty of space for more people, by the way, but as more and more get in the market, at some point, supply and demand, there'll be a bigger supply. It might drop to £800 a month of profit. As more people then join, it might drop to 600. As more people then join, it might drop to 400. And at some point, you'd say, do you know what? For the extra time it takes to run this, I may as well switch it to a buy-to-let and just run it as a buy-to-let. Does that make sense so far by show of hands, what I've just said? Just so we can have a look round. Yeah, great. So when do I think that'll happen? Realistically, I always say 8 to 15 years. I think it'd be 12 to 15, but let's plan on it in case it's 8. So 8 to 15 years from now, I think you'll start to hit that point where SA may not be as profitable as it is now. I don't have a crystal ball. Can't tell you when it'll be. Might be 25 years. But if that's the case, and I'm going to own my properties like you are for the next 50 years, and then your kids are going to own them as a legacy, they need to work as family let when I give up the SA, when I switch it back to family let. So that's why I want it to meet both sets of rules, okay? Now, providing it meets both sets of rules, let's have a look at this scenario, okay? And what I'm going to do, I'm going to assume that each of you is going to live for another 40 years. Now, I might be wrong. Hopefully, some of you live a lot longer than that. And for those that are planning to die sooner, I hope you're not. But if you are, right, your kids will live for the next 40 years or whoever inherits these from you, right? So let's have a look at the maths on this over the next 40 years. Discount. Let's assume we get none. Okay. Coming back to Marco's question, we'll cover it properly later. But worst case, let's buy them for full price and get in the game rather than not. Now, I don't want you to do that. I want you to get discount But let's assume we bought them for no discount. We still got in the game, right? We've now got 3 of these properties that each are making us £10,000 per annum. Now, actually, when you own it, because the mortgage is cheaper than renting one, it's actually £12,000 per annum times 3. So that is £36,000 per annum of profit from your 3 serviced accommodation properties that you own. Now, those of you with a calculator nearby, you might want one if you haven't got one, or use your phones or whatever. Someone put this in the chat for me and work it out yourself. I want you to get involved and get around the numbers. What is £36,000 a year times the next 40 years? Let's work that number out and put it in the chat. What is that number, team? How much cash flow profit will we make from these 3 properties over the next 40 years if we can keep running them as SA? 36,000 times 40 years. By the way, I'm going to wait until we get a few answers in the chat. Good, they're starting to come. They're starting to come. So that's right. It's 1,440,000, right, of cash flow profit over the rest of your lifetime, let's say, the next 40 years. Are they worth having? Yes. Yes. Now, even if they drop back to family lets, the profit won't be anywhere near as much, but it's still a lot. We'll come back to that in a bit, right? But let's look at equity growth. On average, let's say these properties were 100 grand each. 100 grand each. On average, over time, property prices double every 8 years. We know that. But let's say it takes 10 years for easy numbers for me. So you've got 300 grand's worth of property. What will it be worth in 10 years' time if it doubles? That's right. It'll be worth £600,000. 10 years after that, what will these properties be worth if they double again? £1.2 million between the 3. Now, people say, surely they're not going to quadruple in the next 20 years. Well, think back 20, 25 years. What was the house that you live in worth 20, 25 years ago? Probably a quarter of what it is now, right? This is what happens in the market. 10 years after that, 2.4 million. 10 years after that, say it out loud, what are these going to be worth? £4.8 million. If they're worth £4.8 million and you got them for £300,000, that means you've had £4.5 million of equity growth. Your cash flow plus your equity growth on these properties, these 3 properties, is £5.9 million over the next 40 years. I can't see you smiling. What is wrong with you? Right? Do the numbers make sense? Big strong arm so I can check in and make sure. Eden, making sense? Chris? Yeah, great. Okay. So, by the way, this is the maths of family let, right? If you're not going to do SA, please get some of something, get 3 family lets, right? Because even if the cash flow was only 300 grand, which it would be for family lets, still 300 grand, this is still 4.8 million. And I haven't finished. We've forgotten about the refinance. Here's the thing. If you start with 3 houses now, many of you know this maths, but many of you don't, it triples every 10 years. That's without you putting another penny in. Without you putting another penny in, if you get 3, it'll triple. Right? If you have 3 Olliets, they'll pay with refinances for you to get to 9. 3 SAs will get to 9. 3 buy-to-lets will get to, it triples. So in 10 years' time, how many will we have? 9. 10 years after that, how many will we have? 27. 10 years after that, how many will we have? 81. 10 years after that, how many will we have? 243 properties. 243. Now, if we assume that we're rubbish at this and Aran's overestimated the equity growth and we turn that into 2.25 million, right? 2.25 plus 1.4, I'm going to say that's 3.5. I'm being really cautious here. I've halved the equity growth. We know that happens, but I've halved it. And if We have half as many houses. In fact, let's halve it again. We only end up with 60 houses. So I've a quarter of the ability to refinance all right through the time. I've half the equity growth, right? 60 lots of 3.5 million. In fact, 3.5 million was for 3. I'm going to round that down to £1 million a house. 60 lots of £1 million. We're going to make £60 million over the next 40 years. 60 million. That averages to 1.5 million a year. How much money did we need to start with? We needed 3 lots of 40 grand. Many of you have got that in the bank or in equity. Some of you have not, and you can go be your own bank and find one person who will lend you 120k, or 3 people that will lend you 40 each. And you, my friends, will make £60 million over the next 40 years. Obvious question. Who'd like £60 million over the next 40 years by a show of hands? Right? This is SA. This is serviced accommodation, right? But you've got to learn the skill and then you've got to master it. And I've done those numbers down. I've quartered the refinanceability and I've halved the equity growth. So I could easily argue it'll be 8 times the results if you implement with precision. If you go at the pace that Christian's got, you implement with precision and go get this done. So if you're struggling with be your own bank, my friends, if you're struggling to raise money, try harder, right? Or try smarter. Revisit the training, go look at it. Because if you can raise 120k and buy these babies, you're getting that as well as the cash flow, which is amazing on its own. But as well as the cash flow, you're also getting the equity growth, which is gigantic, and the ability to refinance. And that's where the massive profit is. So take a screenshot of that if you want. I finished that page, by the way, and I'll flick back in a minute to the rent to one if you want to grab a screenshot or a photo of that, right? So, but the point I'm making to you is learning the skill of being your own bank if you haven't got the money, and then learning to implement with precision. That's the reward. That's the reward. Finally taking the consistent action. That is the reward.